Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, David Straggy, and here we have the Inside Movies Galore crew with me. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
So, this last week, I had you tasked to watch an incredible animation, which is called Heavy Metal, which is directed by a main director by the name of Gerald Potterton. But there are different directors for different segments that have to go with, and they are backed by some amazing music. So there is this film was filmed in 1981, and it was somewhat backed by Yvonne Reitman, who was the director of Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm.
It was also somewhat produced by him, so there's definitely an influence of his in here somewhere. But this has a backstory where it has a father figure come down in a space. Come down from a spaceship in a Rolls Royce or something like that.
I think it was a Corvette.
The story is called Soft Landing. It was written by Dan O'Bannon. It was like a
wrote a
1-2 page thing. Yeah, he had 2 in this.
And it has a little girl who is supposedly the sum of all evil.
That's the Lochnar. I keep trying to call it the Glocknar from Gravity Falls, but
Well,
I know that's wrong.
The Lochnar calls her the sum of all evil, but while he is telling
The
her,
Lochnar calls himself the sum of all evil.
Yeah.
Yep.
well, he also refers to her as being the one that will
Destroy him.
destroy him in the future. But while doing all of this, he tells her some stories. So why don't we begin with you, Katie? What did you think of the wraparound story with the little girl and the
So the thing that ties it all together, you're
Correct.
saying that the overall. I felt like it maybe could have been a little stronger. Like I thought the individual sections had really strong stories, and then this kind of over one was maybe a little vague for me overall. But I liked that there was one, I guess.
okay.
That had some connective tissue.
Right. I liked that it wasn't just like an anthology with no like thread to hold it together. I liked that but it seemed like kind of a stretch, maybe a little, and sort of a little bit confusing about, so did she actually destroy him? Or like I was getting confused with the time and space continuum.
I got the impression that the stories were all happening somewhat simultaneously. And so like they were happening like as he was playing them.
I didn't get that.
Or at least that's what I thought happened in the last one with the way it ends, which we'll get into when we get to the last segment. But the wraparound was just, this girl's dad is an astronaut. He comes back from space with an alien artifact, which is the Lochnar, which immediately kills him. And it's like, I'm going to kill you too. Here's what I am and why I'm so awesome and great. Like,
Villain monologue before I kill you.
yeah.
Maniacal laugh. Maniacal laugh.
I don't think it laughed.
So, what did you think of the wraparound story, Brandon?
I know that something needs to tie it together, and I'll admit, having that opening where he gets out of the space shuttle and takes the car down to the planet, which has, of course, now finally been recreated, apparently in space, thanks to Tesla. But just that it speaks to the MTV generation, especially of the time. So that in itself made the tie-in well worth it.
What did you think of the wraparound story, with this film, Kabuki Jake?
It was there. And actually, I kind of think like, especially in light of their lead-in discussion, that we kind of skipped a little bit here of initial impressions and that sort of thing with the film. Overall, I think, but honestly, the wraparound story it kind of put me out of the film. I had no real interest in it. I mean, I understand the connective tissue idea, but most anthology films don't even have that, and they hold together just fine, I think. So I don't know that they needed that part, but it was an interesting element in some ways.
Okay. Now back to initial reactions.
I kind of have one more thing to add.
Go ahead.
So from the DVD extras, I got the impression that the wraparound was done very, very quickly. Like there's even like an alternate version of it. And so that's why it's really thin, because they did it really quick.
Makes sense.
Okay. Dustin, was this a first time watch for you?
Oh no, I'd seen this movie a few times before. Like growing up, I had heard of it, and I'd seen the poster, but I never really saw it until they did a South Park episode where they took like a lot of stuff from this movie for the cheesing episode. I think it's called Major Boobage. And after I saw that, I was like, oh wait, this is heavy metal, isn't it? Because I'd heard so much about it, and I went out and saw it, and it was pretty damn cool. Like I can only imagine how mind breaking this was. Like seeing it when it was brand new in the 80s. And nobody had done this kind of stuff with animation yet. Just like pushing things so far, like visually and in terms of like what you could show. So this must have been. I can understand why people are so into this movie, because this must have just been incredible, like back then. Well, especially if you had like drugs. Like holy crap.
From what I understand, it wasn't exactly released right away either to the public at that point in time. It didn't have a set release date for quite some time, and it had a later VHS release, from what I understand. So, Katie, what was your initial reaction to this film?
Well, this was a first-time watch for me because like Dustin mentioned, it's kind of part of pop culture to know that this movie exists and to see references. But I never, I think I had an opportunity as a teenager to watch it, and I just passed up that opportunity. Never watched it, and I think I probably would have appreciated it more had I watched it at a younger age first. I think I could easily see it being a movie that I would have liked more as a kid or a teenager, and then it probably would have stuck with me.
Okay.
I think watching it now, like, yeah, I don't know. It was all right, but as an overall, I don't know. I don't see myself like wanting to really watch it again. So I think I really missed the boat on this one. Like I could see how I would have really enjoyed it when I was younger.
Okay. Kabuki Jake, what did you think about the film overall?
I'm actually going to largely agree with Katie's assessment this time around. I also did not watch this growing up. It was one that was around, and I knew of it probably at least dating back to high school, I guess. Septum had actually showed it to me, what 5-6 years ago, maybe, if that.
It's been a while.
I'd seen it once, and I was thoroughly nonplussed the first time I saw it. And this time I may have gotten a little more out of it, but my mind still wandered a lot towards the end. Okay. It has its moments, and there's a couple of really good moments. But overall, and back to what Dustin was saying, when this came out, I'm not sure it was the first to do some of these things, but it was almost certainly the first thing in American cinema that looked like that. I can't imagine there was much else, although I believe I read it's actually a Canadian production, so we can't even fully take credit for that. But it's I can definitely see that if you were a child of the 80s or the late 70s and you were introduced to this in your teens or something like that, you would have probably thought it was the greatest film ever. I could believe that. But yeah, like Katie said, I probably missed the boat on that. I can appreciate its historical interest, but
Brandon, did you miss the boat like these other two?
I don't. I actually think I got to it as close to the release date as possible, even though I was only 2 at the time of its release. I did not watch it at age 2, though. I actually had a funny story with how I was first introduced to it. I was introduced to it when I was in elementary school. One of the teachers had apparently got a hold of it and had decided to give us a cartoon to watch. Because back then, of course, adults at the time, if it was a cartoon, it was meant for children. And they didn't bother to pay attention to the rating type stuff or anything on it. It's just it was a cartoon. It's made for children. So she put it on, wheeled in the VCR and put it in the VCR and then left. And we got to watch heavy metal for the first time. I think I was 8, maybe.
Wow.
And I got to watch it in elementary school.
Interesting sexual education.
It's a great story.
The closest I can claim to that is watching Clash of the Titans
in
Predator 2.
It's cool.
I saw Predator 2 when I was maybe like 4.
I'm saying
Oh, but not at school.
We did watch Clash of the Titans at school, which was pretty awesome when you were in high school to be able to do that.
I remember watching like the Romeo and Juliet with like Claire Danes, and I think her boobs are out, and the English teacher just like covered it up with his binder.
Yeah, they did that in high school.
The Pirelli one in school.
Yes.
In high school, we saw the Romeo and Juliet, where you saw like Romeo's bare butt, and our teacher didn't cover that up at all.
And I
We saw the original Romeo and Juliet when I was in private Christian school. Boobs and all.
The Christian school I went to, we saw Gone with the Wind, and he would like fast forward through the parts where it says like the Civil War like needed to be fought and stuff like that. Like he would basically like fast forward through everything offensive, and then when it was over, it's like Franklin Idiot, I don't, and then the movie ends. Click.
I thought watching The Miracles of Life was actually quite violent.
Weird.
But it's still, to me, it made a big impression on me.
Well, I bet.
I'd never seen, well, of course, I guess at 8, I'd never really seen anything quite like that before. But it definitely changed my concept of what animation was and what it was for. Maybe that's why I actually was as into things like anime and I'm more open-minded as opposed to like my parents who still believe, for the most part, even though they do have some common sense to it, that if it's animated, it's for kids.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people are still like that. We can go back to South Park, actually, being a thing. Like, my parents were watching South Park with my brother when he was maybe 5.
Yeah.
And it was the Lord of the Rings episode where they had to, like, return the porn tape to the video store. And the adults like just like make things worse because they're like, oh well, the kids saw it, we'll explain everything. And mom and dad said they were like, this is for kids, what's happening? Like, no, oh my god.
There are some animations with some adult content.
I'm disappointed. My parents were never that dumb.
It is always interesting when you have like people in supposed authority figures and whatever. Like the other weird one that I had was when I had confirmation class at when was that, like 11, 12 or whatever, and our minister showed us The Last Temptation of the Christ, and that was kind of a fun thing to watch in that setting. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I take it as personal offense that people look at animation as kids stuff. It's like I've seen so much animation, and so much of it is not for kids.
I know.
It's not the only one.
I've
But, yeah.
So, ultimately, breaking it down into some of these sections, one of the sections or segments called Harry Canyon, which is about the New York City cab driver in the year 2031. So evidently a futuristic.
Evidently, we have like flying cars and stuff in what 10 years.
And a little button that you can zap on the people you don't like who are in your back seat.
And society has been fully libertarianized, and if you want the cops to help you, you have to pay $1,000 a day.
Yeah.
What do you think about this futuristic world that this cabbie was in? Did we notice any surroundings? Like Dustin, did you notice anything?
Oh yeah, I was like, I actually, people are gonna hate me for saying this, but when I saw the Twin Towers in the future, I actually laughed slightly, like, ha, the one thing they thought wouldn't change.
Right.
See, I told you it was bad. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, it's true. Quite a few things had changed in that segment.
But
No.
yeah, it's a pretty grim future.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what did we think of the cab driver?
Real upstanding guy.
Well, he was kind of like the film noir sort of detective. He was like the film noir just character. Like, I can't really say detective because he didn't really detect anything, but he reminded me of that kind of character.
Yeah.
He detected that pussy. That's about all he did.
Well,
I mean, was that not like really quick? I was like, damn, he didn't have to do anything. That was like immediately she was like all about it. I was like, the man wrote this. Shit.
What did we think of the girl?
Well, she didn't necessarily have a whole lot of characterization. Like, it was kind of unclear. He was like, oh, is she, is she playing me to get the money? Was something that he kind of thought to himself, but she didn't really come off that way at first. Like, she did near the end, of course. But you couldn't.
It just seemed like they changed their minds at the last second. We'll just have her do this. It wasn't, unless she was really that great of an actress, but it didn't seem like it. Unless I missed something.
I
Like, why
think it
did she all of a
was a
sudden turn that way?
corruption. I think it was just a corruption element. The idea that, in the face of it all, that the money just corrupted. I think that was a theme going through the whole. When you look at New York, I mean, look at
one
New
of the
York back in
qualities of
those
the
days.
orb.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that corruption just in general. Because, I mean, like I said, look at New York in that time period. New York was very scummy, and the thought that New York was going to get any cleaner or better was kind of ludicrous at the time.
Did anyone see the taxi driver look alike of Robert De Niro with that mohawk getting into the taxi?
Yeah.
That's great. I missed that. Well, I missed his face. Let me put it that way.
Well, it wasn't Robert De Niro, but for me, it kind of reminded me of Taxi Driver, just a little bit.
I did get the same sort of thought, like Taxi Driver reference.
So ultimately, what did we think of the gangster in there and his crew that he had called Rudnick?
Well, as the villains, they were all like suitably gross.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were kind of
like bubbly.
They were kind of stereotypical, just like villains, just with like a visual flair.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't.
One
there
guy
wasn't
with
a whole
the
lot of
cigar, he reminded me like Jabba the Hutt. He walked
I
away.
almost wonder if that's what they might have been going for.
Kind of reminded me of that character in Monsters Inc. that had the tentacles.
The tentacles.
Yeah, he
I
was.
don't know. Never saw that movie.
I thought you were
Put it
going to
on
say
my-
Mr. Water. I thought you were going to say Mr. Waternoose. And how have you not seen that movie? You have children.
I just have one, and she doesn't care about that movie.
Well, you should watch that movie anyway.
Yeah, I know it's good. My little brother used to like it and watch it, and I don't know. I just missed that whole part of his life where he was watching that movie all the time. I just didn't pay attention.
Okay.
Ah.
And the music that was involved in here was actually Veteran of the Psychic Wars by a Blue Oyster Cult, True Companion by Donald Fagen, Heartbeat by Riggs, and Blue Lamp by Stevie Nicks, and Open Arm by Jeremy.
Yeah, this whole production had like a really aggressively awesome soundtrack.
Oh, heck yeah.
All of the top talent from that whole
All
the 70s and the early 80s. I mean,
But-
I usually don't like that kind of music like at all, but almost everything in this movie worked for me.
would you consider these particular singers or groups heavy metal, though?
Not
Not
really.
Journey. Journey's definitely not heavy metal, but Ryan sings a really mean Journey, so I will give them a pass. But Stevie Nicks is definitely not metal.
I don't think I'd ever heard Stevie Nicks and known it was Stevie Nicks. Like, my familiarity with Stevie Nicks is as the butt of that joke in the one South Park episode where they see a goat and they think it's Stevie Nicks.
Stevie. Fleetwood Mac? No?
Nope.
Alrighty then.
You haven't seen Monsters, Inc. Give me a break.
Whatever. Fleetwood Mac is way more important than Monsters, Inc.
I
I'm just
disagree.
saying.
It's just rumors.
This-
Oh, we had this discussion last night on our video. The songs that people miss. You never know. You know, there's so much music out there. I admit, I probably didn't consider myself familiar with Fleetwood Mac until 5-6 years ago. I had heard a lot of their stuff, but anyway.
So
I'm still laughing at Katie's like setup of how quickly that I don't really want to use the word relationship. Like I'm gonna hear that all day. Thanks a lot, Katie.
segment.
You're welcome.
The next segment is called Dead, where a nerdy teenager finds a green meteorite, puts it in his rock collection, and during the lightning experiment, the orb hurls the boy into the world of Neverwhere.
He shoots him into it shoots him into like a different dimension
Where he
and
transforms.
changes him.
And he can't go around with his dork out, so he has to put on a loincloth.
Make a bald-headed muscular man called Den.
He just beat on dudes and it's like, wow, I'm pretty good at this.
That made me laugh. Like, oh, such a little boy.
I like that he was voiced by John Candy.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed John Candy sprinkled all through this one, movie.
Witnesses that a young, naked, nubile young woman is about to be sacrificed to Ulat.
Or like Lovecraftian thing. Like it very briefly takes a shape like from some water, but you never get to see whatever the hell it was,
Well,
which I think was kind of nice.
any case, he tries to escape with her, and but then him and the woman gets waylaid by the queen of the land of Neverwhere, who
No, they get kidnapped by that dude. 'Cause he saves her from the queen, and then they escape and like have that, it's heavy metal moment, and then like the Queen's rivaler. It was never really explained who the fuck that guy actually was. Beyond, I lead the resistance. Like, all right, sure.
Resist.
Insert antagonist here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was kind of like a being that was powerful, but seemed to more want that orb in his possession, whereas the Queen had the power, had the orb, and just kind of ruled over all. And what did you think about the fact that both leaders vanished?
It kind of had to happen because like, you could tell, like, for a moment, I thought they might have been like related, like it was some kind of like rivalry thing. Because they said that whoever controlled the scepter could like gain the power by doing the sacrifice, and so it seemed like that's what they were really after.
What did you think about the strength of Den that he had?
I want to. So the story is very. I keep wanting to say like classic, basic, wholesome, in that it's just like it's like one of the earliest fantasy stories like that you would read. Like it's very. It doesn't operate on a very deep level, but that's kind of what I like about it. Is that it's just very straightforward and it's like, yeah, we're having fun, we're doing stuff.
It's old school. It's like the old school comic serials that they did, you know.
Exactly.
And it always involved this sort of teenager's or younger child's dream. And what child doesn't imagine themselves being this big hero doing these things? I mean, Life is Strange, for those who actually are familiar with that game series, they had they had a free one, a freeware that was released where one of the characters is a child and he's playing superhero. Captain Spirit, I believe, which was also very deep. But that's that escape, and that's what I thought that represented. I mean, everything came from what would be, in my mind, the mind and imagination of that teenager.
Yeah.
That's a good summary.
Yeah.
I like that breakdown.
That breakdown too. What did you think, Katie? What did you think of this segment overall?
That one was okay. It wasn't. I don't know. It didn't. I liked the first one a little bit better than the second one. Kind of was. I don't know. It was just meh for me. I didn't love it.
Okay.
My favorite isn't for like 2 more yet.
I don't think it was. Did you think it was like really? It wasn't terribly gratuitous. I think like the first one.
There was like some
right?
funny moments with boobs in that one. I think, wasn't it? Like he's like running to get the or he thinks he's got it or something, and the lights come on and he's got like boobs in his hands.
Yeah. It was like you could kind of see it coming, but you were like indifferent.
It's in front of him. That's all he needs.
But like, wow, 18 years of nothing, and now twice in one day. What a
Yeah. I liked that. I thought that was funny.
All right. Next segment is called Captain Stern, where we have a captain.
I think I like that one the most. That might have been my favorite.
fun.
Stern. He's on trial for numerous serious charges presented by the prosecutor.
Captain Stern, you are here charged with 12 counts of first-degree murder. And then he like reads like a list of stuff for like 5 minutes.
That's my favorite line in the movie. You stand here accused of 12 counts of murder in the first degree, 14 counts of armed theft of Federation property, 22 counts of piracy in high space, 18 counts of fraud, 37 counts of rape, and 1 moving violation.
Like, damn.
How much more could you actually get accused? You know?
Plead guilty. It's your only chance. It's like, no, I got an angle. Our best bet is to get a secret burial so they can't desecrate your grave. Ooh. You know it's bad when that's your lawyer's advice.
What do you think of this Captain Stern character?
who's Zach Brannigan? Like, he made me think of Zach Brannigan.
Stern!
He's clearly a super terrible person, but
Yeah.
for some reason I just liked watching him sweat. Like when, well, what happened, which we're about to get to in a few seconds. Like it was. Man, I love that segment. I think the song really like sells it though.
And what do we think?
Right, I could hear Zach Brannigan saying, "I got an angle."
And what did we think of the character witness, Hanover Fist?
Like that
That's
was
his name.
that was his name, yeah.
Yeah.
Hanover Fist.
I like it.
It's like his plan. Well, his plan ended up being not at all what everyone thought. What we thought it was.
Kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it kind of fooled the audience too because you thought, oh no, the Glocknar's like the Glocknar. Damn, I'm doing it again. The Lochnar. The Lochnar. Yeah. Brain death. Well, we got the impression that it was the Lochnar transforming him into like the monstrified Hanover Fist. But the Glocknar didn't actually do anything from the way that the segment ended.
There are actually no Lochnar. Wait, there is.
Yeah, he's playing with it.
Voice.
There's actually there's a cut sequence between this one and the sequence after it where like, well, at the end of this one, Hanover Fist is like jettisoned into space, and he's still holding the Glocknar, which it can change its size, and so it's the size of a marble, and like his severed hand like falls into into like the primordial ooze, and we get this. It's like it was on the DVD. It's a deleted scene. I think it is called Nevermoreland, and it's like a whole history of evolution thing. It's really cool. But anyway, so Stern's real plan was to have Hanover Fist get up there and say, "Oh yeah, he's a great guy," and then pretend to flip out and turn into a monster and like chase him all over the station, inadvertently freeing him. Which that plan succeeds, and like Stern Stern shows everybody, what a dick he actually is. Like he gives Hanover Fist the money, and then like kicks him out of an airlock.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next segment is called B-17.
Yep, and real quick,
That one's my favorite.
the one between that was deleted. It's his hand holding the Lochnar falls into the primordial ooze, and then you see like evolution play out all the way up to that was what World War II era.
Yeah.
Era gear. Yeah. So that segment was supposed to be bridging it, but they had to cut something, and it was what they ended up cutting. It's a really beautifully animated sequence. Like it's really grim. It's entirely set to music, like no sound effects or nothing. And you see like dinosaurs form. You see reptiles like of the sea and air. Like it's pretty intense. It gets grim.
Early animation and scoring stages, but then didn't get further than that.
Well, what's interesting in this next segment is it calls it B-17 and B-17 bombers when these airplanes are actually the flying fortresses.
Yeah, and this is a Dan O'Bannon one too. So this was the other one. Dan O'Bannon really likes zombies.
I'm not surprised when you say that. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, this is the one I was most excited about when I saw it. I was like, yeah, that's really a cool thing.
Is that the dude that was on the plane? He was calling Nelson.
I noticed that.
So, ultimately, this kind of reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode.
I was thinking Tales from the Crypt, because that was one of O'Bannon's bigger influences, and it really showed a lot here. Because didn't it play out like a Tales from the Crypt episode? Not episode. Story. The plane gets shot to hell, and everybody except the pilots are killed. and then they all come back as zombies when the Lochnar. Hey, I actually said it right. I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep like fucking up its name. Blame Gravity Falls, and South Park, because they have the Lochnar. Fuck, they have it in there too.
I did
anyway.
like this one. It did take a grim moment where you know it kind of reminded me of like this a World War II bomber flying into like the Bermuda Triangle type of thing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you would expect that if an airplane flew into the Bermuda Triangle district, that he would at least end up meeting some of the ghosts that are haunting this area.
It was by far the most horror inspired of all of the segments. And if you're talking about South Park, I mean, that was the one that they highlighted in South Park Shattered But Whole, where when you were doing the summoning, it basically, the guy comes in on the plane at the time.
The cheesing Gerald summon, where he comes
Yes.
in on the B-52 and attacks your enemies.
But I agree, it is my favorite of all of the segments. Which I hate that I fell asleep originally when I tried to watch it, and then at that part,
Wow.
and then if I watch anything in bed or start to watch it in bed, it's only a matter of time before I pass out.
Same. I'm the same way.
Oh, I
So-
guess I can't argue with that. I've done that. I've done that too.
But
Although-
it's to me, it is one of the more exciting and interesting ones that they had there. Though I have to admit, Stern is close second.
So at the end of this or during this segment, Heavy Metal Takes a Ride by Don Felder is playing, and in the previous segment, Cheap Trick was playing Reach Out.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm from Rockford, and Cheap Trick is from Rockford, but I'd never heard a song that I knew was Cheap Trick before.
You're not
I'm-
missing too much.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got. But I really liked this song. Although it's probably, so this is my theory. So I tend to really not enjoy like classic rock. Like I just find it lifeless. But if it's put to something, then I can usually get into it. And I was kind of experiencing that with this movie, because like there'd be like a song that if I just heard it, it would be kind of generic and it'd be like, whatever. But like, having the visuals along with it, like sort of gave it some context, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. You know, because
And
the
there was
music is
a lot of music in this movie that I didn't even think. I mean, there was way harder shit back then that did not make it in this movie. So
well,
I was
heavy
surprised
metal.
by some of the
They would have
choices.
put old
Heavy metal's the name of the magazine, so that's why it's called heavy metal.
Yeah.
It can be kind of confusing.
If
I
they
guess I didn't know much about the magazine ahead of time.
Death and Iron Maiden in here, then I could have. This would have been a perfect movie.
Oh,
Yeah, totally. Some Iron Maiden would have fit really well with some of these segments, I think.
But ultimately, the next segment is called "So Beautiful and So Dangerous," where we have a Dr. Anrak, a prominent scientist who arrives at the Pentagon for a meeting regarding the mutations that are plaguing the U.S. And when he sees the Lochnar in the Locket of Gloria, it kind of looks like the Ghostbuster secretary, in a sense.
Janine was a character in this. And like the scientist just like, you know, attacks her for the Lochnar. Although it doesn't really look like that. But
But while they are speaking, this alien spaceship comes and sucks the scientist and the chick up. And the scientist, I believe, is
he's a robot. The scientist was a robot that the aliens had put there Like, it's kind of funny because, like, when that scene happens, it's like us humans are alone in the universe. It's like stuttering and like just sounding weird and crappy. And like while it's happening, this enormous, you can't possibly miss it, spaceship is hovering over the Pentagon. And did anybody else like that? Instead of beating them up or whatever, like general sci-fi convention that they typically have for like boarding ships, like it's just like a tube that drills a hole in the roof. Did anybody else enjoy that?
I did. And then, of course, John Candy is the voice of the robot.
A slightly pervy robot. Like, oh wow, we got a girl on the ship. It's like, oh, I have to go back right away. It's like, you can't. Destabilization or whatever bullshit. Right, guys? And they're like, oh yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, let's get married. As long as we have a Jewish wedding.
Yeah.
So,
I can't think of what was it she said? I have a feeling I come home and see you with a toaster.
that was the best line of the short.
Screwing the toaster.
I have mixed relationships never work. I have a feeling that I'd come home and you'd be
screwing the toaster. That was kind of a surprising line, but then I had to remember it's like right, 1981, right.
So, Katie, what did you think of this segment?
I will admit to having fallen asleep during this one and remembering that John Candy played the robot and liking that, and beyond that, I apologize. I took a nap.
Rough.
And Eugene Levy was actually one of the male.
Oh, that's right.
And he was Edsel, which was one of the creatures that was one of his cohorts on the spaceship.
I like how they had a machine. Like, they needed a machine to lay down, like, the lines of drugs that they do.
And here we have Cheap Trick playing I Must Be Dreaming. Grand Funk Railroad playing Queen Bee. The first heavy metal band that I can say is a heavy metal, possibly, Nazareth. Crazy, a suitable case for treatment. Don Felder, All of You, Sammy Hagar, Heavy Metal, and Trust, Prefabricated. The next, I believe, and the final segment is called Tarna.
And that was the main segment. Like, that was a good third of the movie, and it's what the cover art was representing.
Yep.
So it's also like a really cool, like, its own fantasy story.
Yeah, it seemed like it could really have gone off, for much longer, like in its own thing.
That's kind of what they did with. There was a sequel to this called Heavy Metal 2000.
I wondered about that.
It's basically a longer version of that last sequence, except not nearly as good, frankly. The Heavy Metal 2000 is not very much like the original Heavy Metal, and it kind of sucks, frankly.
Oh, it's just that long segment. That's all it is, and I feel like that was a mistake.
It's the same segment, like, made longer and, like, not as well.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like a bad idea.
But ultimately, we have the Lochnar, now the size of a giant meteor, and it crashes into a volcano on an unnamed world, ending a tribe of human outcasts and defeated barbarians who ravage the peaceful city, which these are the Tarnakians. And the elders, they try to summon the last of their warrior race, but before the last of their warrior race arrives, they're all killed. So, but the Tarnakian that arrives is very female Xena the warrior princess type warrior. So
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting
badass, I think.
angle to it, because they were talking about, we need to summon how do we summon him? Like, they're making assumptions about what that why?
I like that the hero is a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think
Agreed.
trying to get to, where it's like,
She was the strongest female character, I thought, in the whole movie. She was the strongest female character.
Correct.
Well, she better be. It's her segment.
Not a high bar.
The segment was actually somewhat erotic a little bit too, especially when they were focusing on having her dress into her.
When she puts on the armor.
Correct.
Like, she goes to a temple and like finds the. I don't want to.
I like.
Well, she finds like the sacred armor or whatever it's called, like, and the sword.
Yeah.
And there's a cool story behind that particular scene. So the way that they did the animation for that was they hired a model and they did a live action shoot. Yeah, they did a live action shoot where the model put on like the same outfit, and then when they were animating it, they referenced the live action shots that they made, and so that's why that sequence is so like elaborate and realistic.
I want to know where that outfit is now.
You could almost cosplay it.
I am certain people do that. There is no way that has not been done.
The particular detail to that structure that had the wasn't she on a pterodactyl and wasn't she holding a sword?
Yeah, I just called that thing Bird because I didn't. I don't know if it has a name, but I was referring to it as Bird. So Bird was pretty cool. Like, he features prominently in the South Park episode too. Like, okay, what were their takeaways of cool stuff from heavy metal? The Bird.
Well, I call it. I say
it was a pterodactyl though, and it was pretty sweet. Like, in every scene it was in.
It was pretty bad, especially when it escaped from its
prison. So anyway, she puts on the armor. She goes to the city that the Lochner's marauders attacked. She finds a medal on the Council of Elders that belongs to the leader of the marauders, and so she's like going to bars and like, where can I find these guys? And so that's kind of a cool scene. It's just like a quick like thing in the bar showing off like how tough she is, where she just kicks the shit out of these three guys. And then she like goes right, and she flies right into a trap somehow, which seemed a little bit odd, considering how much like experience with this kind of going after villains thing that kind of suggests that she has. So it's like, wow, that was easy. Like, they just fly into a net.
And then doesn't she end up topless? Like,
yeah.
Somehow that always happens too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was just a certain level of nudity that was in here.
Right. They kind of had to insert it wherever.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a woman in this scene? Let's put her titties out.
Did you notice that a lot of the architecture in many, many scenes was just like topless women?
Pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
Like, after a while, like, you just kind of accept it, and it's like, yeah, all right.
Well, you knew who that was.
Got it.
Yeah, I personally find...
What did you think about the level of gore in the animation? Were they more than they need, more bloodier than they needed to be?
I don't know if it was. I was gonna say I don't know if it was more so or less so than the time. A lot of those animations at the time had a lot of dark, almost gory. They're not quite as gory. I think it was more sexualized than gory in a lot of areas. I mean, look at movies like The Secret of Nim, which is a children's movie, but my goodness, is that dark and very violent in a lot of places. To me, almost as violent as this one, though not as sexualized. Or look at a movie that's not so, that was produced like Watership Down, which is twice as gory as this one.
True.
Well, I don't know about well, yeah, I saw Watership Down like a year or two ago, and my reaction was like, "Holy crap, what is this?"
Yeah.
Well, I remember reading the book Watership Down, and I know it was just as grim as the animation, but the animation went beyond extremes to make it so.
But well, anyway, so she's captured, and of course, you know, the weird topless whipping scene happens. Which, again, it was just kind of like, well, it's heavy metal, fine. Like, even though it was still like really weird, at least to me. And then, like, the whole thing with like the pit and the bird escapes, and that was kind of weird. Like, they were like, you know, toss her in the pit, and they put like they throw like her armor and her gear like back in there too. It's like that's kind of strange.
That's where the wraparound story and this story kind of intermix and intertwine, I think, towards there, and that's what gets kind of confusing towards the end. I believe the
well, she basically sacrifices herself to destroy the Lochnar at the end of this segment, like after defeating the Marauder captain, and then in our wraparound, like the Lochnar is like rah, and it shatters, and like it blows up the girl's house, and you can tell that it's a miniature too. Like, that's how fast they had to do it. Like, they couldn't animate it; they had to do a miniature. But I think that was the DVD of this comes with a fairly long documentary that I did not have time to revisit. But I'm pretty sure that was something they talked about, how they had to do it as a miniature instead of animating it, just like to save time. But it ended up looking really cool visually anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then when the girl from the wraparound is like picking herself up off the ground, like a different version of the bird shows up, and like she gets on it and her hair turns silver, like the character from the last segment. And like the mark appears on her neck, and it's like, she's the new one. Like, wow, that's cool. So the wraparound did sort of have a purpose. Like, even though it was really thin, I thought that was pretty damn cool. So, I mean, I was happy with it. Even though I recognize it's maybe not the best story ever told.
Anyone else have that sentiment?
I guess. Yeah. Like, I mean, whatever. It worked for what it was. Like, I think, looking at it, that this was 1981, and, you know, I think it was already said that, like, in 1981, you know, if I was a teenager or something and I had seen this, I probably would have thought it was the most amazing shit. I probably would have thought that had I seen it at 14, you know. But I think because there are so many more really cool anthology movies that I probably enjoy a little bit more. Like, I think I got lost on some of the storylines in some of these segments. I really enjoyed the B-17 one, you know, Zombies, written by Dan O'Bannon. Like, of course,
yeah.
Why wouldn't I like it? You know, so stuff like that is really more my speed. I think I would have enjoyed it more if it were other, you know, horror stories.
Would you say that the animations were somewhat slow?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I guess for the time period, it was probably okay. I know Disney probably had the market cornered on, like, awesome animation for that time period. So there was probably better animation available at that time. So it was a little subpar, but it sort of reminded me of cartoons from when I was a kid, like old Hanna-Barbera, you know, just kind of like the movements, or like the He-Man cartoons and stuff. Kind of reminded me of that. So it was a little nostalgic for me, so I kind of like that. I didn't mind it that it was shitty.
I have to say, in my opinion, of course, my viewpoint, I started it, I first saw it at 8, so very different, I guess, start to the whole deal. But to me, it is a quintessential piece. It is something that helped define a genre and an entire generation of the time. I like looking at these films not just in the sense of it holding up today, and I think that there is a lot of it that requires nostalgia to keep it up. Though I still think that there's a lot of it that does still hold up today. But for what it was and for what it did, I still feel that it is one of the greater defining films of the 80s at the time. As I said, it defined it really was one of the true definition of the MTV generation.
Yeah, and on top of that, a lot of people were. This is sort of Katie, I think you asked some of your fans, what were your impressions of it? And one thing I noticed a lot was that many people were inspired, to do art or write or just be creative by this movie. So it definitely had a lot of positive impact.
And also something that wasn't mentioned was the heavy metal magazine that inspired this film. Like, I didn't read it too much, so I don't know what it was like or how the movie compares to it.
It's like a collection of like sci-fi stories and like little comics and stuff. I tried to read it when I saw the movie a few years ago, but there were a lot of issues of it. And it was mostly text, so it was kind of like I don't have any time for this, sadly, kind of thing. But
it was a science fiction and fantasy comics magazine, and it was known for its dark fantasy, science fiction, and erotica in the mid-70s.
Sounds about right.
So it had a French title that literally translated as Howling Metal in 1975. So
it was French. That would explain it.
Well, no,
Canadian, right?
He discovered a French science fantasy magazine called Metal Hurlant, which had debuted in 1975. So he wanted to play the title off of this French magazine. So he called it heavy metal. So
that makes sense.
But
it's just like cackling in the background.
In any case, that's pretty much they published 136 issues in 16 volumes in April from 1977 to 1992. So.
See, I told you there were a lot of them.
So, ultimately, did anyone else have anything else to add?
Not really.
I don't know. I feel like we've really covered it quite thoroughly.
Yeah. So on that note, do we want to do our after discussion live, or do we want to?
Well, I think we should do our planning session offline, but we might as well. We might as well like give some kind of announcement. So, in order to give you a better experience, we're working on updating our format and having, I guess, less of a free-form tone and more organized. So, see, guys, we care about you. So we're going to work on improving the show.
We're gonna keep it freeform somewhat. So don't feel like you're gonna be like, I can't talk or anything. You just have to.
Well, I'm just telling you guys. We might end up doing more anthologies because they have segments that we can compartmentalize as we get used to doing this kind of thing. So, might end up seeing a lot of anthologies. Buckle up.
I doubt it.
Alrighty. On that note, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you
do?
Hey, Septum Sins.
Oh, sorry. I run a channel called Septum Sin versus the World. Also, I'm on a channel with my wife called That Nerd Couple. But the channel itself is all about physical media. and the love of physical media. We're currently working on a top 15 list. I've been working on it off and on today. A top 15 where cover songs were actually better than the original, as sort of a tribute to Aretha Franklin and her passing. But again, we're all about physical media. We do a lot of news segments where we show what's coming out. We do pickup videos, and in general, we have a good time. I also do some work for Inside Movies Galore when it comes to reviews. I'm working on trying to figure out how to access a particular medium to do some reviews on, and I will get back once I figure out how to do it.
Alrighty. And Kabuki Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, I'm Jake. I also often guest on Sipton Sin versus the World, and we some of the news we played with a lot of news segments this week. We've expanded our offerings, if you will, and what new release things we're looking at. So it could be interesting, or it could be too much. We'll find out, but it's a lot of fun. And I'm trying to get a little better at doing solo videos, although the media ones I'm still putting through that channel. And I have a solo one to film this week that'll be coming out soon, a review of a couple of anime that I watched.
Saturday.
What?
Saturday. I've got it already scheduled.
Okay,
And edited.
Saturday. And basically, other than that, I work a couple jobs. One of them is very media oriented, and one of them is not. And that'll probably do for now.
All right. Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a body positive horror artist and alternative model. You can find me at patreon.com/Katie Cadaver or on Instagram at Third Eye Open. That's 3RDEYE0PEN. I'm also the makeup artist for horror punk band Rat Bat Spider. You can listen to them at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. And I'm a dead girl for Degger's Dark Coffin Classics horror TV show. You can watch episodes at vimeo.com/DDCC. I perform and produce for Grindhouse Tees Burlesque Production. You can find us at facebook.com/Grindhouse Tees. You can also see us coming up September 29th at the Psychobilly Nightmare Freak Show. That's at the Hopper's Haunted House in Rockford, Illinois. We're going to be there providing some entertainment on the second stage in the evening. So come see us out in Rockford on September 29th. I also am a Tromet. What?
Where in Rockford?
The Hopper's Haunted House in Rockford, Illinois.
Where in Rockford is that?
I don't know. Look it up, honey. Hopper's Haunted House.
Okay.
I don't have the address in front of me. I'm also a Tromet with Troma Entertainment, and you can check us out at troma.com. And I do some things here at Inside Movies Galore, working on helping out with our new format for the podcast. And eventually I'll get back to doing some interviews and movie reviews very soon.
Awesome.
Hooray.
And Dustin, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
I live here in Milwaukee, and I collect movies, vinyl, figures, and basically anything else I encounter. It's somewhat of an addiction, and to try and at least make something good come out of it, I'm launching my own YouTube channel where I just show off, like what I found on one of my many ridiculous and expensive trips out into town. There's also going to be some reviews since I watch everything I collect. I think I can give a informed opinion on a lot of these releases. Like, is it worth your time to buy, I don't know, like the Hocus Pocus Steelbook, which is apparently ridiculously rare and I probably won't be able to get a hold of? I personally suspect no. But yeah, so that's the channel I'm working on starting. every name I wanted has been taken. So, just a quick rant about that. It's like, oh, what about the Horror Fiend? It's like, oh no, that's already a channel with a few hundred subscribers. Okay, what about the Horror Crypt? It's like, oh, okay, some variation of that is, well, right now I'm the Crypt of Horrors and I have one video, but it kind of sucks. So I'm working on it for you guys because I care. I also have an Instagram for basically the same purpose, DHR Hunter. And I am also working on reviews for Inside Movies Galore and doing everything under the sun, apparently.
And my name is David Sturgey. I run Inside Movies Galore. I as well blog at Movies Galore Milwaukee, but I put that on the back hand to do video reviews for the YouTube channel here. So definitely check out some of my latest reviews. Some of them are old. And sometimes some of my reviews show up on Septum Sim versus the World, so check his channel out. And fairly soon, Septum Sim and I and will probably go on about some mermaid animations as soon as we can schedule them. And
haven't we done like every piece of mermaid content out there by now?
Not yet.
Are you trying?
Well, this is something that the boys and I are going to be doing separately from this discussion. So it's going to be interesting. Sometimes we get together and discuss films outside of the group, because that it creates an interesting atmosphere, you know?
Ah, got it.
So, alrighty. Well, on that note, let's everyone say goodnight.
Good night.
Like, share, subscribe. Do it. Tell your friends.